This is Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Here now, Tony Brueski.
You got a woman writing a children's book about grief while allegedly poisoning the man who made her a mother. You got forgery, burner phones, Google searches for lethal dose of fentanyl. And now you've got 26 felony financial charges stacked on top of a murder case. It already looks like a scripted Dateline special. So where does the truth sit in all of this chaos? It's a good question. Today, we are diving into one of the most critical pivot points in the state's case against Kouri Richins. The prosecution's theory that the motive for murder wasn't rage or impulse or even revenge. It was spreadsheets, debt, a crumbling real estate empire, hemorrhaging cash. According to prosecutors, Kouri was buried in more than $1 million in loans, had monthly debt service exceeding $250,000, and saw her husband's life insurance policy as the only way out. Allegedly. And that's just on the financial side. Joining me is former prosecutor and current defense attorney Eric Faddis to break down the legal guts of the thing, what the state's strategy really is, how motive gets weaponized in court, and whether the jury is going to buy a financial collapse as a reason to kill. We're also getting into the deeper strategic terrain. Should the financial fraud charges have been tried separately from murder? Does stacking them risk confusing the jury, or worse, feeding the defense's narrative that the state is drowning a weak case in paperwork and panic? And yes, we get into the weird stuff, too. The alleged forged signature on Eric's trust, the walk the dog jailhouse letter Kouri says was just a writing exercise, and her Google search history that reads like a how-to guide on fatal overdoses. So what does it all add up to in court? Is it a calculated killer with a spreadsheet full of motive, or a financially unstable wife turned media scapegoat? Let's get into it.
Well, Tony, anytime you have a case where a partner's accused of killing their spouse, even though you don't have to prove motive, the jury's going to want to see it. They're going to want to know, what is the reason why this person would have just offed their spouse in such a way, allegedly. And so I think this is the prosecution's attempt at really fortifying that motive element, that this was financial insecurity to the tune of 7 figures plus, and that motivated Kouri Richins ultimately to poison her husband, recoup the insurance money to try to pay off those debts that were skyrocketing as the months went by.
How easy is this to pass off to a jury? I mean, it does kind of, this is a scenario that plays into, if you're a true crimer, if you like Dateline, if you like true crime and all that sort of stuff, it follows that narrative where it's like, oh my gosh, there's this big financial motive. So I feel like it's an easy one, not super hard for a juror to digest this idea. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is that something where we hear so much of it, like in just the true crime world, of this sort of thing happening? I mean, does that kind of hinder judgment a little bit to think, oh yeah, well, if there's these signs of this, it must be that?
I mean, surely it's a common theme in cases like this. We saw it in the James Craig, Colorado dentist poisoning murder case, where they're saying they had a financial motive to do this. This is also a poisoning of one spouse case. We got to be careful about not just having some sort of default motive to which we always resort, regardless of how strong that evidence is. And so here, they're talking about these financial transactions, allegedly unauthorized, like embezzlement from the husband's company, that kind of thing. But the prosecution still has to, come with it and bring the evidence to substantiate that. And if they can't, that would really undercut not only the financial crimes, but the murder charge.
Without a doubt. Obviously, from early on, maybe not obviously, if you're kind of new to the case and just starting to learn about it, Eric, her husband, was not super keen on this idea of this new property. This was a sprawling, large home that she wanted to invest in, and it was, to put it lightly, a fixer-upper. It was an unfinished home, a very large unfinished home that needed a lot of work to get done. And he said, in no uncertain terms, I don't think so, honey. This doesn't look like a great investment for us. I don't think we should be doing this right now. and probably also in the back of his mind thinking your company is failing. Anything you've been touching has not been working. Let's not do this. Let's not go bankrupt, honey. But I think he might have been trying to walk that fine line of staying married and maybe hoping her fun little activity that was draining the family, maybe she'll find some other hobby. But it wasn't that. Prosecutors are claiming that she forged Eric's signature on a life insurance trust. I mean, how hard is it to prove a forgery was knowingly done to facilitate a homicide?
There are several moving pieces to that. So, to prove the forgeries, sometimes they'll get a handwriting expert who will analyze Eric's and Kouri's handwriting and say, "Hey, this is clearly not Eric's genuine handwriting. Someone else did this," and then try to tie it back to Kouri. But also you got to think about in a marriage when there are issues, there are financial transactions that happen, and sometimes one side might not be too keen on it, but they might acquiesce to it. And so simply because there are, some financial suspicious moves being made, that doesn't necessarily mean there was a murder. And so I think that's how our defense might try to style this is like, hey, this is sort of normal financial disagreements among a married couple that was going through some struggles.
What's the legal strategy here behind charging her both with the financial crimes and murder? I mean, we're kind of going a little a la Alec Murdaugh here, where, one doesn't always necessarily equate to the other. And does it help prove motive? Or does it risk jury overload or even an appeal at the end of the day?
Jury overload, fatiguing those folks back there is a legitimate concern. I think that's part of why in the Diddy case, they really tried to streamline the charges. And still, I think the jury was overloaded with information that caused confusion back there. Always a risk that you got to think about. If proven, it certainly solidifies a financial motive, but the defense is kind of saying, hey, the prosecution's only doing this because they know their murder case is weak. And so they're trying to just kind of like bootstrap in these other scary sounding activities to make Kouri look like a bad person. And so, yeah, I think the defense is going to say, hey, the murder case is weak. And that's the only reason these financial crimes are rising now, which is kind of in a late hour to be filed as this case has been going on for several years.
Is the murder case weak? It feels like there's a lot there with this poisoning case. Including just a lot of weird stuff from behind bars where she continues to incriminate herself after the fact, the whole wag the dog letter and all that. And if you're unfamiliar, in a nutshell, Kouri was writing a book, quote unquote. It was more like a somewhat coded letter to her parents that talked about feeding the dog and saying this and saying that, and basically giving her bullshit alibi, allegedly, to her family. And go with this story, for lack of a better term. It doesn't look good. Again, doesn't necessarily prove murder. But again, how strong is the case?
There are a number of pieces of evidence that do not bode well for Kouri Richins. You mentioned the letter that she wrote to her mom in sort of this coded, veiled language, but kind of instructing her, arguably, to help her kind of cover this whole thing up. On top of that, there were some searches, is my understanding, such as what is a lethal dose of fentanyl? Eric Richins died of fentanyl poisoning. Can cops uncover deleted messages? And these searches were from not her own phone, but a burner phone. So an added level of suspicion there. Not surprising that this artist, if we can call her that, is kind of saying, hey, no, the letter was just a work of fiction. I'm a writer, that kind of thing. And so the jury's going to have to sort of decide the genuineness of that representation.
Artist. She did not. She wasn't the one who did the artwork in her book, though. Someone else did that. She was just short of AI being able to do it, so she had to pay somebody. But yeah, I don't know what I'd even call this. Con artist, maybe. That might be the one, too. A legend, considering all the financial issues that she's also being charged with, I think that might be a fair assessment. The state seems to think that she might be one of those. Let's talk about the case a little bit more, not so much the financial end of it. I mean, how strong is the state evidence that this was a staged overdose and not an accidental one, as the defense claims?
Well, one compelling piece of evidence for the state, I think, is that there was alleged prior drugging. That Kouri Richins did this more than once. And in fact, the allegation is that she spiked Eric Richins' sandwich with fentanyl, which I don't even know how you do that. But if the jury accepts that, what that shows is a pattern of conduct, premeditation. It shows that Kouri Richins is capable of drugging, that she knows how to do it, that she has access to the poisons in order to do that, and that she in fact tried to do it once before. And so if the jury accepts that as true, I think that's going to be really problematic for the defense.
How do you do that? Well, I got to tell you, I went into Subway just the other day, and not only do they toast the sub, they now offer a fentanyl dust at the end to make that sub extra delicious. I passed. I said, I'm not into that. That's a little weird. That seems like kind of a strange upgrade to offer. It is a little pricey, but some people swear it really makes that chicken taste like chicken. So whatever you got to do.
Subways are getting rough out there.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you got to do, you got to eat fresh. And no, they're not offering fentanyl at Subway. If some tweaker is listening to this going, we got to go to Subway. No, it's a joke. Between guilt and the grind of perception, what do we actually have here? A woman accused of forging her dying husband's signature on a life insurance trust. A trail of financial misdeeds that prosecutors say led straight to a motive. A cocktail laced with fentanyl and a second poisoning attempt over dinner. Plus a jailhouse letter allegedly coaching her family on how to sell a story about Eric buying drugs in Mexico. And all of it landing in front of a jury expected to sort motive from myth. Yeah. That'll be interesting come next year. But what Eric Faddis helped underscore here is this: motive might help a jury feel something, but it doesn't seal a conviction. The state still has to draw a clean, credible line from financial fraud to premeditated murder, and they have to do it without letting the whole case collapse under the weight of its own moving parts. Because if you overload jurors with too many crimes, too many charges, and too many emotional swerves, they don't focus harder, they freeze. Or they second guess. That's exactly what a smart defense is counting on. What also stands out here is a defense's strategy shaping up in real time. Kouri Richins isn't just on trial for murder. She's on trial for being a bad wife, a bad businesswoman, a bad person. And that makes for great headlines, but not necessarily great evidence. When you paint someone as a monster based on moral failings instead of provable intent, you open the door to reasonable doubt, and reasonable doubt is the only vote that matters in a courtroom. Of course, if the state can prove she forged Eric's trust to cash out after poisoning him, that changes the entire landscape. But proving forgery without intent to kill, not just financial intent, is a total different legal animal altogether. So where does that leave us? Somewhere between spreadsheet and syringe? Between motive and marketing? And for the jury, maybe between too much and just enough. We'll keep tracking every move in the courtroom and every contradiction outside of it, because if the case is about money, lies, and murder, it's also about the narrative control behind all three. I'm Tony Brueski. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section on YouTube. Just search Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski if you're not already there. And be sure to find us on the podcast platforms as well. Again, just search Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski, and you will find our podcast there. Press subscribe and do leave us a comment in the comment section on YouTube. Until next time, I'm Tony Brueski. We will talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast.